Welcome to F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans. I'm your host as always, Terry, and I'm here to keep you up to date with all of the unbiased, hard-hitting Formula 1 news. So grab your favourite mug of coffee, sit down, strap in and get yourself comfortable to join in the conversation. Because this is F1 Coffee Corner. This is Full Beans, the must-have podcast for all Formula 1 fans. Welcome back to F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans the podcast. I'm your host, as always, Terry, and it's race week again. We are in the last of the triple header. It feels like we've been in race week since, well, last month, I suppose technically we have. But what have I got in store for you today? In the Espresso news, I've got all of the latest, what's happening in the world of Formula 1. In the coffee chat, we're going to be talking about what happened in Austria, especially between Lando Max and Max Verstappen, a very hot topic which has completely overspilled and melted down on the world of social media. And of course, in the takeaway, we're going to be looking ahead to the British Grand Prix. I cannot wait to be back at Silverstone this weekend. I can't wait to be back to the home of Formula 1, Silverstone. It holds so many memories for me, especially seeing Dad there for the first time last year for not only his first Grand Prix, but my first ever Grand Prix. Absolutely buzzing to be back there. We're going to be there for qualifying and the race itself. I'll tell you more about what we're going to be up to at Silverstone, but without further ado, if you haven't already, like I said, my name's Terry. This is the F1 Coffee Corner. Please hit that follow, like, subscribe button, whatever is available to you on the platform you're listening or watching this on. And yeah, join the Coffee Corner and let's get down to some business. We've got Mercedes looking to switch to Adidas after being with Puma for so long. Now, Adidas used to make the football kits for the German national team. That's come to an end. I believe they're switching to Nike, and that's left Adidas looking for a brand and a big sponsor, and it looks like Mercedes are the one. Now, this might not kick in until 2026, but they are trying to pull it through for 2025. So I'm not 100% sure on the timescales for that one, but that's the latest rumour on the paddock with regards to that one. Let me just see what else we've got in terms of the news. We've got Max Verstappen saying latest row between Jos and Christian Horner was unnecessary. You'll remember this exploded in Austria. So Jos was due to drive one of the Red Bulls in the drivers' parade that they had. Apparently, Christian Horner vetoed that. We don't know if that's for sure. Christian's come out and said he didn't, but it seems like he vetoed that idea, and it all kind of kicked off. In the end, Jos didn't drive it, and it looked like there was tensions rising. Yuki Tsunoda issues apology on social media after his comments. Now, I was called a lot of things for taking offence to Yuki's comments on the radio that he made on Saturday. I just want to explain it from my point of view. Now, I understand where Yuki's coming from in terms of English maybe not being his first language and that he didn't realise the offence it caused and that he's looking to learn from that. My view on this was very strong, and I stopped short of making a big video about it because of this. My emotions were quite high. We have, disabled children, as many of you know who listen to the podcast and follow me on social media. We've had that phrase aimed at our children when they've been having either a seizure, a meltdown, all those sorts of things. It's been done more than once, and it's been done in a malicious way. Not by somebody like Yuki Tsunoda, can I just add, but by members of the public. So when I hear that phrase, it instantly gets my heckles up and takes me back to those moments and those things. So I appreciate what Yuki Tsunoda is saying. I hope he has learned from it. There's no need to dwell on it. But I also don't appreciate the comments about being a snowflake and other things when, for me personally, that's a very offensive comment that I admit it's a personal thing because it affects me. But from my point of view, it hurt to hear someone who's a Formula 1 driver with the platform they've got using those sorts of comments on the team radio, knowing that it's broadcast to everybody. So hopefully, like I say, he can learn from it and move on, and we can put it all to bed behind us. I get what he said in terms of it not being his language, and I appreciate that and the fact that he took to social media to make the apology. But he shouldn't have had to in the first place, is my point. We've then got Oscar Piastri slammed his track limits penalty in qualifying as embarrassing for Formula 1. That was when, obviously, he went over the line. The FIA couldn't categorically prove to McLaren that he was over the line. McLaren appealed it. They then got the appeal wrong in terms of paperwork and what rules they were quoting. The FIA said, well, tough. It's You wrote down your reasons wrong. Therefore, we don't have to listen to it. And they didn't even get to the hearing. These are the rules. And it's really hard on this one because I would like to have seen the picture to see, was Oscar actually over, as they say? That's what that blue line was put in for. That's why we had the AI track limits introduced. So you'd kind of hope that's what did it. However, you've also got to understand McLaren's point of view when they're saying there wasn't a clear picture provided and they'd like to see one. So I get it from both sides. I think if the FIA had that clear picture, would it have been any harm in just releasing it? Or would it have just been just as easy to just go, actually, there you go. We've had on that way. Daniel Ricciardo, driver very much being talked about at the moment. Lots of unfounded speculation. He was going to be replaced almost imminently. I, for one, said that he would see out the season. It seems like what I'm hearing now is that Visa Cash App RB are agreeing with that, and he's going to have to the end of the season. Now, I would not put it past Visa Cash App RB to make a change at the end of this season and bring Liam Lawson in. Depending on what Daniel's results prove. So I think Daniel is very much under pressure. I don't know whether or not he might do the old I'm retiring trick and go off that way if he doesn't get a seat, and maybe that's how it's going to be painted rather than he didn't get his contract renewed. I honestly don't know. I think he's under pressure. I think he needs to deliver. And I think that from his point of view, he's 8 points away from Yuki, I believe, last time I looked. So if he can get close to Yuki, he's got a case, bearing in mind they've already re-signed Yuki for next season. We've got Audi Formula Racing CEO Adam Baker has praised development of the upcoming power unit with significant milestones and goals achieved. We're hearing a lot of this from the Formula One teams in terms of their engines, that they're hitting milestones. What, of course, we don't know is how that transpires to on-track performance. So I'm taking all of these with not even a pinch of salt, but literally a bucket load. Charles Leclerc's failure to set a lap time in the Austrian Grand Prix sprint was caused by anti-stall. We saw that in SQ3. Christian has accused Toto's pursuit of Max as a distraction tactic to cover up Mercedes' problems. He could be right, but I also think Max is kind of giving signs that he might be open to a move from Mercedes, or someone in Max's camp is giving signs that he's open to a move. Would probably be the better way to describe it. That's for sure. What else have we got in terms of the news? Have a look. Mercedes waiting until as late as November. We talked about that one on podcast. I think that's pretty much for the news. Like I say, driver announcements. Carlos Sainz has had a very late move from Alpine that he's now considering. It remains to be seen whether or not we're going to hear anything before Silverstone. From what Carlos was saying last week in Austria, he's going to wait until after the triple header. I think that the Alpine deal is certainly pricked his conscience in terms of whether or not it's a move that he wants to make. We know they're going to look at an alternative engine supply for 2026. My only caveat to all of this is if you look at Mercedes and Williams partnership, they were basing that on luring Carlos to Williams in the sense of, we've got this Mercedes engine, it's going to be good from 2026. Now, if Alpine take a Mercedes engine, would that be a better proposition from Carlos in the sense of it's Renault with a Mercedes engine, which just sounds wrong on every level, doesn't it? But that's what we're faced with, or Renault with a Ferrari engine. Would that be a better deal to Carlos, knowing the backing of Renault in Formula One? I still think that this whole point around Briatore and engine moves lines Alpine up for a sale. If the offer's right, I think they're a holdout for a decent offer. That still aligns with what I said all along about Andretti coming into Formula One. I think that if they drop the engine split, it makes it even more feasible for Andretti to come and buy them. It separates the two and actually gives a clear definition of what you're buying into. So if anything, it makes for that one more to happen than the other way around. But we're not hearing anything on that front at the moment, so it remains to be seen. We did, of course, get the news from Aston Martin of Andy Cowell has taken over, or will be taken over as CEO for Aston Martin Technologies from Martin Whitmarsh in the 1st of October. Now, for those who don't know, Andy was integral to the Mercedes hybrid dominance era, and he was head of the performance there, head of the engine department there. He was sought after by pretty much everybody when he quit Mercedes. So he had a really long extended gardening leave. He was sought after by Red Bull Powertrains, the head baller, but said no to that one. Has been literally on the sidelines since then and has now come back as Aston Martin CEO for the technology side. This is a really smart move by Aston Martin and one that I think people are underestimating. his partnership with Honda. Now, bear in mind, Honda are going to make exclusive engines for Aston Martin. To bring in someone with Andy Cowell's experience and expertise, not only that, the amount of talent that he can attract by bringing in his appointment is immense. Now, he's 11 years younger than Martin Whitmarsh. It's a good move for the future, for the team as well. Martin's done a great job in terms of, sailing the ship since Lawrence took over and the developments on that one. And it does open up the possibility to, could we be seeing Adrian Newey there? Now, I dismissed this straight away because I didn't feel it was a move that Adrian would want to do. However, you can't help but feel Adrian is playing the market. So I don't know if you saw the latest Sky interview with Craig Slater last night, but Craig Slater basically interviewed Adrian Newey. So I think it was the summer ball for the upcoming British Grand Prix. And he was talking about his future. And what Adrian was saying was he wants to launch the Red Bull hypercar project. Then he wants to take a break and then he's going to make a decision. And Craig was pushing him on when that would be. And he was being more inclined to after the summer break. I feel this is a negotiating tactic by Adrian and probably Eddie Jordan, who we now know is his manager. I think there are multiple offers on the table. He certainly doesn't sound like someone who's talking about retirement. Far from it. He's talking about the next project. And I feel that all of this, what we're seeing now, is bargaining between what's the best deal for Adrian in terms of what he wants to do, price, obviously, and everything else. We know that Ferrari in the mix. We know that Aston Martin are in the mix. We know that even like the Williams are in the mix. And I suppose from the point of view of Adrian, it's a case of where does he want to go and what does he want to do? And with it being probably one of his last big contracts before he retires, he wants to make sure it's a smart one. But with a project like this at Aston Martin, could this actually excite him? I think it could. You've got your own engine supply, pretty much a works engine. Let's be honest about it. If Honda aren't making engines for anyone else, it's a works engine. You can make your car around that engine. You've got one of the best minds in terms of powertrain development helping with that engine. And then you times that with one of the best minds in terms of regulations, building the car in Adrian Newey. And then you've got someone like Dan Fallows already there in the role. That is a dream partnership. Now, I know their driver lineup might leave a lot to be desired for, but in terms of a car, Aston Martin could be assembling an absolute dream team behind the scenes, coupled with a 200 million state-of-the-art factory. That could be a real game changer and one that maybe Aston Martin have written off these regulations. Maybe that's what they're focusing on and we haven't seen it. But boy, that whets the appetite for me. That is huge. All of these moves could be absolutely monumental for Aston Martin and their future in Formula One. So it certainly remains to be seen what's going on with that. But I just think that sort of project might just excite Adrian enough to maybe make a move that I personally discounted for one. I was like, no, where's that happening? But we know that he's worked with Aston Martin with the Valkyrie project. We know there's a crossover there. We know that he's worked with Dan Fallows before. Andy is somebody who he's going to have the utmost respect for what he's done at Mercedes. And we know he obviously gets on with Lawrence Stroll from that point of view. So yeah, could this just be the move that we didn't see coming? It remains to be seen. But that brings the end of the Espresso News pretty much. So without further ado, let's grab the coffee and let's get on to the coffee chat and Austria, because we got a lot to talk about in Austria. Let me just bring up the results for the Austrian Grand Prix. Now, we know that the winner was, of course, George Russell. Right place, right time. But likewise, like everyone will say, you've got to be there at the right time to capitalise on a mistake. So what we've got George Russell was the winner, Oscar Piastri second place, and Carlos Sainz rounded off the podium in third place. I would say that I think Oscar's going to be the most disappointed if he hadn't have had the track limits in qualifying. If he had qualified higher up, it probably would have been a race win for Oscar, let's be honest about it. And it's another one where he'd be kicking himself thinking I could have won that with what happened with Lando and with Max. And before we go on to the rest of it, let's just talk Lando and Max. Now, the one thing I want to point out is I absolutely detest what's going on with social media at the moment. This toxicity that's being whipped up by media companies, and they're big companies as well, big teams as well. The teams are doing it. The outlets are doing it. They're whipping up this frenzy before Silverstone of Max versus Lando. They know it increases ticket sales. They know it increases clicks on there. They know it's good for business in that sense. but it's not good for business in the sense of what it actually brings out, which is that very toxic atmosphere. I did a live on TikTok last night, and I probably had to mute or block more people than I've ever had to do. And that was because my opinion wasn't what they agreed with. Now, I'm not suggesting that my opinion is gospel and right at all. I like to think that I try and come at my opinion from a very unbiased point of view and try to look at all of the facts when I bring my opinion. And yes, I have favourite drivers. Yes, I have favourite teams. I also have respect for everybody who competes. And I also feel that you can be a fan of someone and respect what someone else is doing. That's really important, and especially in this one. So if we look at Lando Norris and we look at Max Verstappen, the biggest question I've been asked all week, who's at fault? And you can't do that. You can't actually say that, because ultimately, when you look at it, you've got a thing where you've got Lando Norris was dive bombing coming from far back. Now, if you listen to Peter Windsor on his podcast, I'm not a huge fan of Peter Windsor, but there are occasions when his insight is really good. And I feel that his insight onto this incident was really valuable. You know, he talked about a car coming really far back, getting the tow, getting DRS, arriving late into the braking zone. Did Max move under braking? I'll say he moved, but did he move dangerously? And did he move in more than one direction? Is a different question. So I feel there's a bit of, I don't know, greying of the area there with regards to the regulations. I think that Lando was aggressive in trying to get past. I think he realised about halfway through that exchange he had a time penalty and was too aggressive trying to get past because he wanted to get past Max and go. Max, I think, was really worried about letting him get past and go because he felt that he would have got over 5 seconds and therefore he would have won the race. Max doesn't like losing. It doesn't matter whether he's 70 points or 7 points in the championship. He doesn't like losing. There's no way that Max is going to willingly give up that place. And with the actual contact, that was clearly Max's fault. So I think there's some stuff Lando did wrong and could have done better. I think there were some bits that Max could have done better. And I think that also came into this accumulation of the contact between the two. And that's the problem, because if you look at the point of contact, absolutely, is it Max's fault? If you look at the racing that happened before that point of contact, you can attribute some of it to Lando, some of it to Max. The bigger issue I have with this is the stewards. Now, the stewards, once again, sat on their hands a bit with this, and they need to get quicker at delivering verdicts. When Lando went off, it was fairly obvious he had gone off. So therefore, it's going to be a time penalty. We all called it, but the FIA didn't call it. They sat on it and waited to issue 5 seconds. Now, if they'd issued the 5 seconds, that would have let Red Bull tell Max. They should have told him it was coming anyway, but even so, that would have issued a time penalty, would have issued it from McLaren's point of view. There might have been a bit of calming down. Who knows? It might have made a difference. The same when the contact was made or the moving under braking. Those things should have been cleared up straight away and gone, no, it's not an investigation, or yes, it is, and this is a penalty. And I still feel there's a call for professional stewards within Formula One. We have past drivers, we have people who on social media are accused of being biased, and it's hard to defend when they're there in a volunteer role. Now, I know the FIA depends on volunteers, and without these amazing volunteers, whether it be race makers at Silverstone, marshals, scrutiny, stewards, it would be hard for Formula One to put on races without these supporting roles from the FIA. But I also feel there's enough money within Formula One as a business and within the FIA to come to an arrangement where we have professional stewards, where we have stewards who are trained, who, it's hard to say neutral, but a bit like football referees, you know, are as neutral as possible and are consistent in what they deliver. And I feel this is a problem. I don't feel we can go back to 2018, 2019, because we have moved on, regulations have changed, and some things are different. But I also feel that if we had that professional stewardship, if we had those people who were the same people week in, week out, who were being paid, who were being reimbursed, once you pay someone, you can hold them to account. If someone's doing a volunteering role, it's very hard to hold them to account. That's a fact of life. If you're paying someone to do a job, you have KPIs, you have targets, you have a criteria, you can performance manage those people. It makes it a lot easier to come back on them and say, actually, your performance in this instance wasn't acceptable. It wasn't good, and therefore we can't do anything with regards to it. If you're a volunteer, it's hard to have that conversation because they'd be like, I'm giving up my free time for this. And I hope that makes sense. And that's what I mean by it. I want to see professional stewards. I want to see people who are trained, who are professional, who get paid for it, and are held to account by the FIA. Now, if that means that something in the Concord Agreement needs to be renegotiated, to make that happen, so be it. Make it happen. It's not hard. There's enough money in Formula One to make these things happen. And this is where we need to get better at the sport in general so that we don't have these problems. Either way, both drivers made mistakes. The contact point was definitely Max's fault, but I also feel that Lando could have done better in that situation. But I also think that we've seen this in the past with Senna, with Schumacher, with drivers doing this. This is their form of driving. This is what they do. And they do it to intimidate people, and they do it to make drivers think twice the next time they're in a corner. Whether it's right or wrong, that is what these multiple world champions do. And Max is no different to that one. Now, I've been accused of defending Max because of that, but also you've got to weigh up. We want to see racing. So there comes a point as well where we have to let them race a bit as well. And these exchanges are unfortunately a byproduct of that racing. I genuinely hope it hasn't damaged their friendship. I genuinely hope that they can, patch up and get on. But I do think that Lando is going to be very nervous going into a corner like that with Max again. And ultimately, I think that's what Max wanted. And with regards to the teams aren't ever going to come out and criticise their own driver in that situation. You're never going to have Red Bull going, oh, that's Max's fault, or McLaren going, that's Lando's fault. It's never going to happen. But I feel that, McLaren sharing the Anti-Davison highlights is probably a wrong move. It sends the wrong message. I think we could have just moved on a lot quicker than what we actually have done, because I feel now that Red Bull will retaliate with their social media. As we all know, they like their social media. So I think that there's going to be a retaliation from that as well. And I think what we're trying to do is trying to make a storyline out of something that maybe doesn't need a storyline. It was dealt with on the track. The penalties were applied. The drivers were done. With regards to Lando Norris, bit of confusion online over that penalty. His penalty was served in Austria. He hasn't got a penalty for Silverstone. First of all, they stopped working on the car for 5 seconds as a fail-safe, and it's applied to your finishing time if you've done over 90%. He was on 91% of the race, 91.4, I believe it was, with the lap he retired. So McLaren, I think, played it safe by making sure they didn't touch the car, but it didn't matter anyway. So that penalty has been applied. And the rule for that is if you finish over 90% of the race, you're classified as a finisher with the amount of laps deducted or laps behind you are from the leader. So in Lando's case, he was 7 laps behind Max, or behind George. I say, never mind Max, George won, and behind the winner, so behind George. And that penalty was then applied to his finishing time because he's given a finishing time and is put into P20. Hope that makes sense. Let's have a look at the rest of it. Lewis Hamilton had a big hole in his car, along with Sergio Perez, who had a big hole in his car down in 7th place. Obviously, Max ended up finishing in 5th place after getting that tyre change after that puncture. Nico Hulkenberg with some amazing defending and great points for Haas in 6th place. We've already touched on Checo and his hole being in 7th. Kevin Magnussen, 8th place. Haas taking some really good points from that. They'd be delighted with that. Daniel Ricciardo with a good performance, 9th place. Made some really good moves, some really good defending. Definitely buoyed by beating Yuki fair and square this weekend. And we'll need more of that to keep his seat, as we discussed earlier. Pierre Gasly, 10th place. Really good to get a point from Alpine. Alpine are a team who are slowly moving on the up. But I worry that the updates they've got coming forward aren't enough to keep them in that position. I think there's some other teams who might overtake them. Charles Leclerc had an absolute nightmare in 11th place. Had to get some wing change. Then Ferrari put the wrong tyres on. It was just classic Ferrari, I'm afraid to say, Ferrari fans. Esti Bestie in 12th place. Lance Stroll celebrating 13th place and his new contract, 2-year contract for Lance. Yuki Tsunoda was in 14th place. We then had, scroll down. Alex Albon, 15th place. Williams will be gutted. They're not picking points up at the moment. They're expected a points haul and they're in trouble for not picking them up. We know that Logan Sargent's going to be replaced by the end of the season, and I think Williams need to have capitalised and got some points, and they're going to kick themselves for not getting any. Valtteri Bottas and Joe in 16th and 17th. Fernando Alonso had an absolute shocking Austrian Grand Prix, pretty much missing for most of it. We didn't hear a lot about him until he got a penalty and was all the way down in 18th place, and they need to do better. They need to bounce back at Silverstone, especially Fernando, otherwise he's going to be wondering what on earth he signed up for. Logan Sargent in 19th place. And then, of course, as I said, Lando Norris rounding off the classified finishers, even though he was 7 laps behind in 20th place. And that is your Austria roundup. What do I think of Austria? I think the sprint went pretty much as I thought it would do. I think the race was a bit exciting. I feel McLaren are definitely the biggest challenger for them now in terms of Red Bull's dominancy. I feel the pack has closed right up. The developments are definitely helping with that front. I feel the next few races are going to be interesting to see what's going to happen. We know we've got Silverstone coming up. We'll come on to that in the takeaway and the next part of the podcast. But that is pretty much everything for Austria. Now, what do we have in terms of the championship now? So what has this done? So Max is out at lead, 237 points. Lando is second with 156. Charles Leclerc, 150. Carlos, 135, which, considering he missed the race, is a damn good performance for someone who hasn't got a seat yet. Checo, 118 points. He needs some big results. Oscar, 6th, 112. George, 111. Lewis, 85. Fernando, 41. Yuki Tsunoda, 19 points in 10th place, and that rounds up your top 10. In terms of the constructors, we've got Red Bull, 355 points, Ferrari, 291 points. I feel they've let Red Bull off with their performance since probably Canada onwards. McLaren, third with 268. Mercedes, fourth, 196. Aston Martin with 58 points. Really bad return for Aston Martin. You've got Visa Cash App RB on 30 points in 6th place, catching up Aston Martin. You've got Haas in 7th with 19 points after their weekend. Alpine in 8th with 9 points. Williams with just 2 points. And Kick Sauber last with 0 points. And that is your roundup of the standings. And let's have a look at Silverstone and what's coming up. So we have Silverstone. We've got a circuit length of 5.891 kilometres. We've got 52 laps. First Grand Prix was, of course, held in 1950. Race distance of 306.198 kilometres. Fastest lap belongs to Max Verstappen, set in 2020 with a 1 minute 27.097. With regards to the tyres, I believe we've got the hardest of the compounds. So we've got the C1, the C2 and the C3 compound tyres. No surprises there for Silverstone. Very demanding, very out in the open. And let's have a look at the book to see what this says about the British Grand Prix. So, Silverstone has changed its format numerous times since it opened for racing in 1948. Yet it retains its essence as a fast and open blast across a largely level site. Now, the good thing for Ferrari especially is there's not a lot of bumps at Silverstone compared to Barcelona, Austria, other tracks like that. So they'd be quite happy, certainly with their setup. They won't have to worry about the ride height too much. It's a good track for that. Starting in front of the wing pit building, it's a short dash to the first corner Abbey. This is a quick flick that can catch people out, like we saw with Zhou Rangyu, who was inverted in 2020, when his Alfa Romeo was digging into the gravel and being launched, which prevented it from being launched over the barriers. The gravel trap has now been replaced by an asphalt runoff. The first braking point comes at Village, right-hand hairpin, where there is inevitable jostling for position on the opening lap of the race. Another hairpin follows before drivers are able to accelerate through the gears as they take the kink into Wellington Straight. The next overtaking point comes at the far end of the straight into Brooklands, right in front of the drivers and guests in the British Racing Drivers Club. Balancing the car through the two rights that make up Luffield, the drivers then blast along the straight past the old pits. Then they come to the best few corners. First of these is Copse, a 7th gear right followed by Maggots, and then best of all, the Beckett sweepers, where the drivers have to keep changing direction, their cars on tiptoes in 6th gear. Hanger Straight comes next, and the fastest point of the lap comes on the approach to Stowe at the far end, with cars touching 185 miles an hour. Then exiting the right-hander, the cars drop onto a slight dip called the Vale before entering the long right at Club that completes the lap. And there you have it. So, how it all started. Britain was littered with airfields after World War II, and the decision to create a circuit from its runways and perimeter roads was made in 1948, and with such a success, it hosted the British Grand Prix that year. 2 years later, it also held the first round of the inaugural World Championship. What do we need to know about Silverstone? So in terms of Silverstone, so we're going to be there on Saturday and Sunday. We were just going to go for the Sunday, but we were put in touch with the amazing team at ZK Sports who do hospitality packages. They sorted us out with a great deal for qualifying. So we're going to go down on Saturday. We're going to be in the Hilton Hotel for qualifying, and then we're in the village enclosure for the race itself on Sunday. So yeah, absolutely, like I said at the start of the show, absolutely buzzing to get back to Silverstone. Barcelona was amazing. Paddock experience was amazing. There's something about watching cars from the grandstands, though, that I'm looking forward to doing as well on Sunday as well. It's the best of both worlds. When you're in the paddock, it's the most amazing thing ever. But also, you miss the grandstand atmosphere. So it'd be good to get back into those seats and get back into the noise of the crowd rather than watching it from the TV. There, if you're not doing media work on it, it's quite nice being in the grandstand. If you're doing media work, seeing it on the TV, getting all the info is a much better way to do it. So as a fan, can't wait. In terms of media content, absolutely nightmare being at the track, but hey, there we go. So what if you're going to Silverstone? I've been asked this question loads on my live. Now, I'm probably the worst person to ask. I don't camp, I drive there. We live about an hour and 20 minutes away from Silverstone. Obviously a lot more with traffic on race weekends, but for us, it's much easier to commute. One, we save a ton of money on accommodation. Two, I can help get back and help Joe out with the kids, which is always a bonus. And three, there's something about sleeping in your own bed, isn't there? Where I speak to people who've been at Silverstone camping since Wednesday and miss their bed. So there's a bit of bias in that one as well, which always inevitably goes. In terms of things I think you'll need for Silverstone, if you're going for the first time, I've been asked this a lot. Make sure you've got a phone charger for your phone. Remember, your tickets are on your app. You can't screenshot them and you need them loaded onto the Silverstone app. Make sure you've got your tickets before you go. Your tickets should now be active on the app. Mine certainly are. So I'm pretty much sure they go in sequence. So if my tickets are active, yours should be on there. Check it on there. You go onto the Silverstone ticket app, open it up. You should see a barcode and like a line going around it. That shows you that ticket is active. You'll need this getting to the track, so make sure you've got it ready for when you go in. Make sure you've got a power bank for that phone because you're going to need that. In terms of clothing, make sure you've got suitable clothing. Silverstone, we're seeing British weather today, rain. When you're at Silverstone, 1 minute it'll be raining, the next minute it will be bright sunshine and you'll be in the middle of a heat wave. That's what happens. Make sure you've got different layers. Make sure you've got something waterproof like a poncho that you can put on to cover yourself up in the rain. Make sure you've got suitable shoes because ultimately it is a field, it is gravel tracks. It's not, tarmac paths all the way around. So you will need good feet wear to get round the track. Make sure if you can, you've got some food and drink because it can be expensive at the track. If you are bringing your own sort of water and that lot, make sure you've got a water bottle. There are 3 water stations dotted around, normally around by the toilets, not in the toilets because that just sounds wrong. They've got the water stations outside, normally the toilet blocks. Sun cream, make sure you've got sun cream because it may look like it's not warm, but it will be. When you're in the grandstands, it's like a mini climate up there. So you can go up there 1 minute, it could be sunshine downstairs, and it could be a force 10 gale up in the stands at Silverstone. So just bear that one in mind. Make sure you've got your Visa card with you. Most places are cashless. However, I have heard they had problems last year, so we'll take some cash. So if you've got some cash, make sure you've got some with you. Make sure you go to the toilet before the race. So you don't need to leave the race to go there, and be prepared for everyone doing the same thing. And queues in the toilets are an absolute nightmare for people. And most importantly, have fun. Have a laugh while you're there. Get some great content. If you like music, stay for the concerts because they're worth it. Even in their own right, people like Storms here on stage there, definitely worth doing, and especially if you're camping. And yeah, just have some fun. Don't be in a rush to leave the track because you'll get caught in traffic anyway. Follow the signs going out on the traffic. Be prepared to wait if you're leaving the track because it's going to happen. It's in the middle of a village. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's one-way roads going out pretty much. You will sit in traffic coming out of Silverstone. Get one of the Silverstone radios or tune yours in. If you're using headphones, I know you can tune in Silverstone radio on your phone for the commentary. Also, if you're leaving, tune into Silverstone radio because it gives you the latest on the traffic. So it gives you an idea on what you're doing as well. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So if you are about and you see me, please come say hi. I'm certainly like to think I'm approachable by now. But if you are around, please come say hi. I'm more than happy to stop and chat and talk Formula One. So don't think you interrupted me, far from it. And like I say, Saturday we're at the hotel. Sunday we're at the track. In terms of the podcast this week, so Fantasy Formula Podcast is live an hour before qualifying on Saturday. I'm ducking out because I'm at the Hilton Hotel and the phone signal's dodgy. I know that Adam and Rob are going to be on there. They're going to bring the Tech Corner, which is going to be out as normal at some point on Friday. So I'll write that on Friday. So keep peeled for that one. They're going to talk you through the updates that I've talked about in the Tech Corner. I'm sure Adam will bring back the decaf coffee corner, as he calls it, when I'm not there. So him and Rob are going to go through it. I also know they've got some great giveaways with Fifth Gear Garm, who obviously sponsored the show and are going to be on the show, not in place with me because that sounds wrong, but are going to be on the show as well. So Fifth Gear Garms are going to be on the Fantasy Formula YouTube video. That's live an hour before qualifying. Head over to YouTube, look at FanAmp. You'll be notified when it goes live. Drop into there, get all of the latest for all of your fantasy Formula One news. And we have got an exciting guest coming up on Fantasy Formula as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. Very excited about that one. And that should be coming out in the next week or two. So definitely keep your eyes peeled for that. And I think that's pretty much it. I think we're there at the end of the show. I've kept you for far too long. For those who are going to Silverstone, I hope you have the most amazing time. Like I say, for me, it brings back some real poignant memories. For me, that's where all of this started in terms of going there. I still remember the picture I've got of Dad. It's actually my most favourite picture, which is him stood at the fence in his Williams martini top with his tobacco in his back pocket, stood at the fence watching cars on track for the first time ever after seeing them for so many years on the TV. So it's a memory that sticks with me. It's here. It's on my board. It is my most favourite picture of all time. Just watching him take it all in. And yeah, it's really great that I get to share these moments with him. And we've done some pretty cool stuff. But that for me was the moment where I was like, do you know what? I love this. So yeah, have a good time. Make some amazing memories. With that in mind, without further ado, I am going to bid you all farewell. For those going to Silverstone, I'll see you soon. For everyone else, well, I should see you next week.